welcome back to Lessons Learnt. We're back for another week of Pick and Mix, our sew along from the APQ magazine. And our schedule says for week 4, which is June 6 through 12, to make triangle squares and sashing units. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin this part right here. This is on page 19. And we're going to make these half square triangles. They're calling them triangle units, but basically we're making half square triangles. And then also we will be doing, taking those and making our little sashing, vertical sashing. And let me show you what I mean. If you're looking at the blocks here, you can see that we have 2 vertical pieces on the ends of the rows, and we have a single vertical sashing in between, and then you get to the other side and you have that double sashing again. So every block is going to have sashing around it. For this week it's going to be the vertical sashing is what we're going to be dealing with, and then these end pieces on each row. So we're going to make these, and then we're going to put those together with our plain strips and be ready to assemble rows. Now we won't be assembling rows this week, I don't believe. I'll take a look. If that's not correct, I'll correct myself as we go along here. But what we need to get from our board or from our bin is these 2 groupings right here. This is our background fabric, these squares right here, kind of a large square, and then we're going to take these and put them with these and make our 6, I think it's going to be, actually it's going to be 8 half square triangles out of each one of these pairs, and you're going to have 5 pairs. Hope that makes sense. I never have mentioned that what I'm using for this sew along is a layer cake from Riley Blake called Fragrant Fields, and this is by the designer Lila Tuller. So I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but that's where my blocks have come from. And let me get you a copy of let me get you my blocks so you can see what they look like. Here are my 16 blocks with the corner pieces on them that we did last week. And I did correct the one that I had wrong. I did have one of these upside down, so I had to fix that. So everything is all ready to go now. So you should be at this point right now, all 16 at least of your blocks. Well, you know, you could be making a table runner, but you know, whatever size you're making, I'm making 16 blocks. You should have all those done by now, and with the corner accent pieces on. So that's where you should be right now. Now, so I'm going to take off of my board here what I'm not using yet, which are these. This will be for next week. That's my leftover of that. And then these, we need all of these, and we need all of these. Now these are our plain sashings that I showed you in the picture, these ones here. So you have two lengths here. The longest one is what these are in between all of your blocks. And then we're going to make the half square triangles and put on each end of this piece to make it the same size as this, and then that should just butt right up next to that. So it's going to be important that we get the colored side toward the plain sashing when we're doing those ends of the rows. And there again, I need to check if that's what we have to do this week or if that's next week. Okay, so I'm just going to grab off of here these and these, and I'm going to hang on to this. I think this is all I need for this week. Our 2 different big squares and our shorter background rectangles. So I'm going to take those off and then just set my board aside. Okay, so to make these, all we have to do is just make large half square triangles. We're going to take one of our colored squares. Some of you will have newsprint or low volume prints with white backgrounds, cream backgrounds, whatever it may be, that will just barely show up in these, I believe those are called shoe fly blocks. So let me get your picture of what those look like. On this picture here, you can see that they're right here and here, here, all over in between the blocks. So I happen to be using this green. You may be using a newsprint or some other lower volume off-white or white, something like that. Okay, so let's get to making these, which is very simple to do. You're going to want to draw a line down the middle of one of your squares. Now I find that it's easier to draw the line on the plainest fabric because you can see it, obviously. In my case though, you're going to want to go ahead and do those lines if that's what you like to do. In my case though, I like to I'll turn it this way. I like to use my seam tape, which I've shown you before. And I just use that as a guide to put my stitch lines up and down both sides of my drawn line. Okay, so let me go ahead and get all of these prepared. Okay, so I have all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these done down one way. So you would have had your line from corner to corner and then stitched a 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides. Now we're going to do that same thing going this way. So if you don't have a line going this way and you want one, now's the time to put that on there. And then again, so 1/4 inch from each side of that line. And I've just been chain piecing mine. So I got these all chain pieced up and down. Now I need to do the same thing on the other end, on the other diagonal. Okay, so you should have 2 rows of stitching here, 2 rows of stitching here. Yes, we're going to cut between those two like you normally would for an HST, but we're also cutting this way. I find that the best way to do that is to take half the width of this square and place that on your squares. And I have a rotating mat here. I have ordered a smaller rotating mat. This one is just a little too big in most cases. So I'm just going to go ahead and do half of that one. And then take my ruler and do that again. This way. I don't know. I just find it's easier to do that plus before you do the diagonal ones. And then this will be on your line that you marked, or you can, if you didn't mark a line like I did not, then you just take and put your ruler from corner to corner. So I do this part last. And of course, if you don't have a rotating mat, no big deal. Just maneuver around your table or carefully move your whole entire mat if you're using a small mat or whatever you have to do. So now we have this situation here, except my blade must not be very sharp. So you're getting 8 out of each one. So take all of the rest of your ones that you've done and do that same thing, and then I'll show you how I trim these up. As in our pattern that we need to trim these down to 2.5 inch squares, and the ruler that I like to use is the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmers. These are by New Leaf Stitches by Carrie Carr. And you can get them in all different sizes for all different sizes of half square triangles. So instead of opening them and trimming them, which you can with a regular 2.5 inch ruler, you can just leave these together like this and put your 2.5 inch mark over your seam line. And in this case, these do not give a whole lot to trim according to the pattern. So you may not be trimming much off of these. You could certainly make your squares, these original squares, bigger and then cut them down. But I just went with their measurements and I think I can make it work. So lay the 2.5 inch dotted line right on your seam that you stitched. And then I also cut the dog ears off like this. You can actually use your trimmer to cut the dog ears off. There's little slots here for it. I'll show you. Like that. And like that. Except that one didn't cut at all. This is why I don't use that for the dog ears, is I feel like I just don't. It's just quicker to do it the other way. So it should be right here in that little slot and right across there. There you go. So I would just much rather just cut them like this without the ruler. Plus I feel like I get my blade all in there and up against the plastic and start cutting the plastic and ruining the blade, ruining the ruler. So I just prefer to use it for the outside edges and then just do this number like that. So once you have all of these sewn and cut apart, you'll do this. You'll trim them. You will iron them towards your print fabric like this. And you'll be adding those to the ends of these shorter pieces. And I'll show you that next. Okay, so here's what you should have. You should have all of your half square triangles done now. I just have my first 8. And these are how they're going to be attached to this shorter background strip. Make sure you have your colored pieces going out when you sew them. So what I would probably do is go ahead and stack up all of these. And when you're done sewing all these on, you will have used all of your half square triangles with these. So just go ahead and place them in the right position so that when you go to grab your strip and your half square triangle, you do this, you sew, and you just keep going on that side. And then when you get all of these done, you start on the other side. So let me get going on that. Alright, so I have all of these right hand sides on. Now I'm going to do the other side just like that. Sew these to these. First 4, and you can certainly do the entire stack all at the same time. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes on a smaller scale. The instructions say to press the seam allowance this way, outward. So I'm going to go to the iron and do that part, and then there's one more step we need to do before we're done with this week's assignment. So I'll be right back. These are all pressed outward. Now you need to grab the same amount that you have of these total out of this stack, the same amount. These are your longest pieces that you use for your background. So grab from that stack and begin to sew them together like this. And you're going to sew on this side. So what you're going to see as a finished product is this. Now, you don't have to flip for the other side, because if you sew them all this way with this long side here to your strip, just remember the long side of your print goes next to this. That's how you need to sew those together. And I most likely would sew them with this side up so that I can avoid flipping my seams. And it should be a perfect fit. And just sew a 1/4 inch seam down through there on all of those, and you wind up with these vertical units that we're going to use on each end of each row. So let me sew these ones together and I'll show you what that looks like. You know, I always try to give a pattern the benefit of the doubt, but I have a little bit of regret about how I press the seams, which is according to the pattern, except I'll show you. This, once you put these on, it's asking you to press towards this piece that we made here. And I just felt like that is way too much for that little corner right there. And my regret about it is I wish I would have opened these. And that would have taken even a little bit more bump out of this. Once I decided, you know what, I'm going to iron these open instead of going this way. It's already quite a bump. So if I would have put another layer over that, it would have been even more of a bump. So I opened mine. I wish I would have opened these, but I just kept going. And then I looked at the instructions and saw that this was wanting us to go this way with it, and I was like, I can't do that. That's just going to be way too bumpy right there. So I ironed mine open. So you should have a quantity of these, more than just these 4 by now, if you're doing it all at once. You certainly can do it like I do, just do a few a day, because that might be all the time you have to spend on it. I may be a little premature in putting these together according to what the assignment is for this week, but it doesn't hurt anything. It's not getting ahead of the pattern or anything like that. So let me show you the schedule again. Okay, first of all, this is Wednesday, June the 4th, I think it is, when you're watching this video for the first time. You're still able to finish your blocks, which is what I showed last week, until this Friday, and that's when you work on these. So you have from this coming Friday to the following Friday to get these done. It says to make triangle squares and sashing units. But then week 5 says assemble A and B sashing strips and block rows. So that would actually be these long pieces here. You'll already have some of these built there, and then we made these today is what we did. So that following week you'll be making these, and it's 2 different ones, A and B. So that's next week. So I'm not sure, and it says to assemble the rows, which would mean putting in the plain sashing in the center part as well. So I'll just leave that up to you in whatever time you have. If you want to consider building the sashing as separate from installing the sashing and the borders, not borders. These are sashing as well. But it says the A and B, these long ones for the top and the bottom, and then going across through the rows here are the following week. So however you want to do it, I'm just going to go ahead and make these up for the vertical pieces of my quilt for now. And then these will be ready when I go to the following week, week 5, assemble A and B sashing strips and block rows. So this one here, let me get a block and I'll show you how this will be. It's going to be like this. So potentially you could also go ahead and sew those on to the outer blocks. But you're going to have to know where these are placed. You're going to have to have this all mapped out on your design board, on your bed, on your floor, whatever, what goes where. So I would wait if I were you. But this is where they're going to go. And then if this was over here, then it would be like this. The right-hand side. Right-hand side. Left-hand side. I'm talking about the ends of the rows. And then just plain strips like this one goes in between your individual blocks. So basically, if you can get at least this far, I think you'll be maybe just a tiny bit ahead for the following week. But the following week's assignment is not a ton of work either. So go ahead and work on these. Work on these first. And then attach them to your short piece. And then attach this piece to the long piece. That's basically what our assignment is for this week. So any questions you have, just leave them in the comments or send me an email. Whatever you wish to do, I'll be glad to help you if you run into a snag. And until then, have fun sewing on the Pick and Mix. This is a really fun quilt to make. All right, we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.